welcome to Pages from the Dark Side, the monthly book club podcast with a specialization in spooky. I am your host, Dylan Ludwig, aka Mr. Hyper-Aware, and with me, as always, is my lovely wife and co-host,
Alyssa Ludwig, also known as the Earbud Bookworm.
And today we got a twofer here. We are talking about...
Two for the price of one.
Yep. We are talking about Adam Cesare's Clown in a Cornfield and its sequel, Clown in a Cornfield 2, Frendo's Revenge, or not Frendo's Revenge, Frendo Lives. Have fun with that one. Frendo Lives is the name of the sequel. I'm very excited to talk about these ones here.
I know you are.
And also, my lovely wife has graced us with lovely Slurpees that you'll see.
Not
us
sponsored. We're not sponsored by Slurpee. I wish we were.
I wish we were. Slurpee, send us free shit. But honestly, having the Slurpees is kind of fitting for this. And I didn't think about why, but I'm thinking about it now. I associate Slurpees a lot with going back to school because there's a speedway right by my old high school. And if you think about it, you didn't go to public school.
I didn't. I was homeschooled.
But I look at these books as a really good going back to school kind of book. The setup of it is that the main girl is a new kid at her school, and it's kind of the same experience as like experiencing a new setting for the first time, and there's a lot of anxiety that falls into that, and you're not really sure who you're gonna be friends with or what clique you're gonna fit in with.
Right.
And so in a way, this book is kind of perfect for that. It's also, and August is pretty fitting for that because it is back to school season. Also, the other reason that we are doing these books is that coming up soon is the release of the third book in the trilogy, Clown in a Cornfield 3, The Church of Frendo, which I'm very excited to dive into that. We already have it pre-ordered.
Yep.
And we are here to talk about this currently duology, soon to be trilogy.
Yes.
As always, there will be spoilers on both of these books, and we are just going to go ahead and jump into it. So if you have not read these books yet, please turn this off. I don't know why you turned it on to begin with if you haven't read it, but turn it off. Go read both of them. They're really quick, easy reads. They're geared towards teenagers.
Yeah, they're teen fiction.
Yeah.
I believe it's actually produced. I listen to audiobooks, so I always hear the produced by, but they're from Harper Teen.
Harper Teen, yeah.
So
if you have not read them, go do that now, and then come back now. So, here's a question for you.
Yes.
Do you find clowns scary?
I don't. I know a lot of people do. I don't.
I used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was a kid, the thing with clowns that I think is scary to a lot of people is this. I think it's this uncanny valley sort of effect of somebody who is, putting on another face.
That makes sense. Also, there's like that anonymity factor.
Yeah, and then also there is the visual of, well, you know how most comedians are depressed people ultimately,
right?
It's the same thing with it's the Pagliacci clown sort of thing,
right? Exactly.
Where underneath the makeup is this super depressed human being, probably alcoholic, probably just thinking a lot of dark thoughts, and this is the only way that they can filter it out.
Right.
I was scared of clowns when I was a kid. I'm not now, but...
Well, it's good because our son wants to be one for Halloween.
Meanwhile, I'm just over here almost having colorophobia going... Oh my God. But, we got a Killer Clowns poster here. I love the movie now, but that movie scared the hell out of me as a kid, even without having watched it. Just seeing the cover at Blockbuster. Yeah. Although I was never really scared of Pennywise.
That's interesting.
That's
That's interesting. I feel like that's like a deep dive that we should not right now.
Not right now, but like, because like we'll talk about Stephen King's It another time. But like, I never watched the miniseries when I was a kid. I watched it like later when I was a teenager.
I still haven't seen it.
Yeah, we will rectify that at some point.
At some point.
This clown is not that. Frendo is not somebody in makeup, and it's not a creature that is, disguising itself as a clown. It's a dude in a mask.
Right.
And
a pork pie hat.
And a pork pie hat. And before we jump into the plot of the book, I want to take a moment to talk about Adam Cesare, and one of the reasons that I was really excited to talk about one of his, or two of his projects here in this case. Adam Cesare he's one of us. Yeah. He is an absolute horror nerd at heart. He has written a lot of, pretty easily, high concept kind of easily digestible sort of stuff, including this. This is probably the most entryway thing that he has done. But
this is the only thing of his I've read. May I interrupt for a moment just to ask, is that how you pronounce his name? Because that is not how they pronounce it in the audiobook narration. That's not always accurate, though. I've definitely heard audiobook narrators pronounce the author's name wrong before.
How do they pronounce it in the audiobook? Yeah.
Caesar.
Okay. Here's the thing. He has a YouTube channel.
And he says his own name.
Okay,
then I'm going to trust that.
Cesar.
I will trust that.
Adam, if you are listening to this by any sort of off chance, and I am actually saying it wrong, please forgive me. I'm a big fan. Okay, we're going to move on.
Continue.
But he has written stuff that I haven't read a lot of his stuff, but I really want to dive into more of it. The one that I have read a couple years back is a book called Video Night, which is a 80s set alien invasion body snatcher sort of book. Okay. But he also wrote a book called 0 Lives Remaining, which is about a haunted arcade.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
And then there's another book called Exponential, which is a giant monster movie, but it's also set in like a Western sort of road movie sort of setting, kind of like the first Mad Max or something like that.
All right.
He's also done a couple deep dives into like transgressive horror, so stuff that's a little bit more on the extreme side.
Okay.
Things that I have dipped my toe into that iceberg that I would not recommend that you would do it.
Okay.
Stuff like he has a book called Tribesmen, which is about cannibal ghosts.
Okay.
But it's very much in the same vein as like Cannibal Holocaust, which is probably one of the most extreme things that you would watch.
Okay.
Nothing on the level of like a Serbian film yet. I don't know where his head is at on that, but
all right.
But he has gone back and forth between stuff that is easily digestible and stuff that's a little bit more for like people that are really hardcore into the genre, like me.
Right. Yeah, I'll definitely have to see if I can find more of his stuff on Libby, especially now that I have multiple different library systems on there.
On Libya, on the one that I have, which is just limited to the Columbus Metropolitan, they only have these, but these are the most high-profile things that he has written.
Right.
Famously enough, the first book actually won the Bram Stoker Award for achievement in young fiction. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about, the fact that there's a reason I won that award, in my opinion, which is that it is geared towards teens,
right?
But it is not PG-13 in any sort of level. It is.
Oh yeah.
It is still hardcore R rating.
Oh yeah, it's very, very gory for one thing. Like it's visceral.
Yeah. And there's some people like, well, how's it marketed towards teens? If you really think about it, the slasher genre itself is marketed towards teenagers.
Absolutely.
Who are the people that come out and see Halloween movies or Scream movies? It's mostly teenagers.
Absolutely.
And there is a reason for that. It's because the slasher genre is probably one of the biggest entryway horror genres. There may be a different one. I know people got really into zombies thanks to Walking Dead, but I feel like a lot of people's entryway in, at least for when I was growing up, was people watching Halloween or Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something like that.
Right.
Or even like Jaws, if you think about it, it's a slasher movie with a shark as the slasher.
Okay, I'll give you that.
But I digress. Let's talk about the story of this.
Yes.
Do you want to break down what the plot of the first book is, at the very least?
Okay, so the first book follows Quinn. She's a teenager. Her mom's recently died, and so she and her dad are starting over, and they're starting over in this small town because he's a doctor. And this town, the doctor just left unexpectedly, and so they needed somebody to fill that spot super fast.
Yeah.
And so when they move in, they meet the neighbor. He is in the same grade as her. He's a little bit awkward. And then they get to the school, and she's meeting all these people, and all of a sudden, she's getting in trouble with these other kids for something that she, the whole thing's wild.
It's basically just guilty by association.
Basically,
sort of
yeah. And the kids that got in trouble for something that they weren't doing at that time, something that they would normally be doing, but they weren't at that time. So it was just like a whole big thing. And then it starts feeling like the town's really got some weird stuff going on.
Yeah. One thing that adds to the kind of stigma that this group of kids have is that there's a prologue sequence.
Oh, yeah.
In which they are fucking around at some, like, kind of waterfall sort of area.
Yeah, I forget what they call it.
I don't know, but oddly enough...
The reservoir?
Yeah, oddly enough, it's kind of like the opening of Camp Damascus.
Yeah, honestly, it is. It's very similar.
However, the horror of this sequence is not, a pale-faced demon showing up. It is, oh shit, the sister of one of our main characters did not fall in that reservoir correctly and died.
Right.
Which I would imagine that falling to your death like that is one of the worst ways to go out.
Yeah. And it is made clear later on, I can't remember if it's in that book or the second book, but it's made clear that she was still alive after the fall.
Yeah.
And then she just died on the way to the hospital.
Yeah. But at any rate, it's one of the reasons that a lot of the adults in the town does not like them, particularly the sheriff,
right?
Who just really has it out for one of the other main kids in the group, Cole, who's kind of like this rich kid, but really tries to play down that aspect of himself. And then there's kind of a freak out at a Founders Day parade where, some stunt goes wrong and the kids get blamed for it. And even though they really did not have any involvement in it. And the kids decide that they're going to throw a party out in a cornfield. And...
Did the kids not have anything to do with it?
I thought they made it clear that Cole at least was not involved.
Cole might not have been involved.
Quinn was definitely not involved.
No, because, she's new.
Yeah.
But no, some of the other kids were definitely involved. I think, though, that they might have been the double agent, so to speak.
Yeah, and which facilitates a lot of the action later. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it really sets up this whole battle of the generations kind of thing, like the whole boomers against millennials or Gen X versus Gen Z.
Yeah. It goes beyond, what we see in kind of to go back to it, which is that, the adults don't believe the kids when shit's going on. In this case, the adults fucking hate the kids.
Right. Just plain and simple. They just hate them.
And it's not long before they start getting stalked by somebody who is wearing the suit of their town mascot, Frendo the Clown. Who starts picking people off one by one. He starts with the mayor, and then he goes to one of the other students, and then eventually it escalates to somebody taking a
absolute mayhem.
Somebody taking a crossbow to a bunch of these poor kids, having this party. That is the elevator pitch of it. Is basically kind of this contentious, town with a killer in it. Now, what the book does not tell you is that at about maybe a little over the halfway point, This turns into something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a straightforward slasher book at all.
Yeah.
Which would normally be one person with a taking down a body count.
Mm-hmm.
But as we find out after, like, Frendo gets killed halfway through the book, and you're just kind of like, well, but shit, there's still, like, 200 pages left of book here. Where do you go from here? It turns out that the town took a meeting and have decided to escalate this generational warfare into basically a purge.
Literal warfare.
Yeah, a purge-like situation where they all dress up as clowns and start methodically picking off the kids one by one.
Right.
And it's the worst kind of thing that you can think of, which is the generation that is supposed to nurture you and foster you are the ones that are trying to kill you.
Right.
The funny thing is, if you think about it, it is a reverse Children of the Corn, which is the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
That's about the children killing all the adults and taking over. But, outside of also that this book has no supernatural element to it, which that one does, or at least the movies do. I don't remember much about the original book. But, yeah, it's, it's kind of it's a boomers versus, I wouldn't say millennials, but kind of like Gen Z or sort of situation here. And it, oddly enough, oddly, it's probably on purpose, that the book is very politicized in that sense.
Oh, absolutely. They even have, I am blanking on the town name. I literally just read the book this morning. Kettle Springs.
Yeah.
They literally have a slogan, "Make Kettle Springs Great Again."
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's very much, it's on its face.
He didn't hide it.
No, it's on purpose that this is very much it's a MAGA sort of situation. It's a, oh my God, my children are becoming liberal, and they're...
Right.
Basically, anything to take the blame off of themselves and just go, well, it's Principal Skinner going, am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong. But just taken to that nth degree.
See, you went there, I went the American Dad route.
Millennials! Don't you just wish they were all dead? So, first impression of the first book. What'd you make of it when you read it? Because I recommended this one to you ahead of time.
I really liked it. It was one of the ones, because I read this last year, and it was one of the books that I knew I was going to recommend to other people.
Yeah.
Because I read a lot of books. I think I read like 50 or 60 books last year, and there's only a handful that I recommend to other people, and this is one of them. And
I was a little surprised at that, because I think out of a lot of the books that I have sent your way, this is the one that leans one of the most into the genre itself, because like a lot of the other things that you read usually are like, okay, but this is also a thriller, or this is also a fantasy or a science fiction sort of thing. This one feels like the most like straight up horror books, and it's definitely like very much towards it's geared a lot towards horror nerd culture, which is, what I associate with, like and I did not know that this was going to be a sort of like a purge sort of book, but it was kind of a pleasant surprise, because like, from just the cover alone and just the premise alone, I'm like, all right, well, how do you make a whole entire book out of this? This should be like a novella.
And not only a whole book, but a full 3 books.
A full 3 books, which we don't know the plot of the third one yet.
Right.
But there's this whole entire conspiracy from the mayor. Was it the mayor? Mm-hmm. Yeah, who's also Cole's father. Oh no! Wait, no. I'm sorry. The mayor gets killed at the beginning.
Yeah.
Cole's father is the one that kind of heads up everything, but he's also kind of...
Well, because he owned the company.
Like,
it was a family thing, right? Wasn't it? With Frendo the Clown, wasn't it like Cole's grandfather or great-grandfather?
Yeah, it was...
that came up with the design and the slogan and everything. It's a generational wealth
sort of thing.
Exactly.
But also he really does not love his son. He clearly had a favorite in that in that family.
Right.
And then also, like, basically him and the sheriff in cahoots together planning this whole sort of thing. But, you know, you get to the end of it, and of course there are also, as you brought up, there are some turncoat characters.
Yes.
Because there are these two teens that were initially dressing up as Frendo to be a prank, and then later it turns out that those are the kids that actually were helping the adults because they got the same sort of beliefs, like alt-right belief system. I did not put it together the first time I read it that the people that were wearing the Frendo costumes were that was a foreshadow.
Yep.
But you know, it does go kind of a traditional route with a lot of its storytelling. You know, there is a final girl, but there's also two final boys, really.
Right.
Which, again, to keep with our queer trend.
I know, this is three in a row.
Turns out that Cole and another neighborhood boy, Rust, were lovers and are still lovers.
Yes.
And it's actually, they explore that relationship a lot in the second book. Frendo Lives, which takes place a year after the events of the first book.
Right. Just over a year after.
And this one it's funny because I read this after we watched Scream 6, and that has the whole entire plot line of the people creating the conspiracy that the survivors are actually the perpetrators of the crimes, and that's exactly what goes on here. It's this, this whole entire internet conspiracy that's created by people that are supporters of Sheriff Dunn and his cause from the first book, and they start creating this. They start calling the entire thing a psyop, and it's a mix of people that know that the whole entire conspiracy is bullshit, but then there's other people that believe it, which is very much the same thing that we got going on with Trump-esque politics here.
Exactly.
In case you weren't aware, I lean a lot towards the left. I think that goes without saying.
Yes, but, I think we've probably made that pretty clear.
But and that basically takes the sort. It's funny. It's weird to also read that book after January 6th,
I know,
2021, where people who believe that the election was stolen just fucking raid the Capitol.
Right.
But this one also introduces other characters. There's other. Now, this is where I start to run into a problem with this book compared to the first one, because the first book is very lean and mean and very direct. This one has a lot of other plot tangents going on.
Right. The lengths are very similar. It's a little bit longer.
Two's a little bit longer.
Not much longer. A little bit longer.
Yeah.
I don't know what the page count is, but I know on the audiobook the first one was about 9 hours and the second one's about 10.
Yeah. I think the first book's a little under 400 pages, whereas I think the second one's like 420, 450, something like that.
Yeah, so it's not a whole lot longer. But there definitely is more characters and there's more points of view.
Yeah.
In the first one, it's almost entirely in Quinn's point of view. It does switch to her dad, and there's like a scene with the mayor.
Yeah, well, because Cole gets captured at the end of the second book.
So there definitely is some other points of view in the first one, but the second one, it's like constantly changing.
Yeah. There's this whole entire lead up with Quinn and the boys, as she calls them, are just trying to have fun while she's in college in Philly. She's not in college, actually? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, she's in college. She's at the dorms.
And then there's also another character named Jerry, who is a survivor of the massacre from the last one.
Right.
But the reason for that is because the Frendo posse in the first book, they had an age cutoff, where it's like,
well,
we're not going to kill people that are like 12 or 13.
I don't know that that's true. There was a specific person that had an age cutoff.
That is true.
There was a specific person that said, please run.
Yeah.
I'm not going to kill you.
Yeah,
it wasn't the posse.
By the way, that is a slight criticism I had with the second book, is that they do that flashback, and it's kind of setting itself up to be like, well, this is going to come back into play later, and I could predict the person that was going to be revealed as that pretty early on.
Yeah, it was. It was not super well hidden, but it was also like, I feel like that was okay.
Yeah. Quinn's dad is also mayor in the second one.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened. I guess it's just a vacancy of power there because everybody that was in command of the town died or went missing in the first one. And then you also have this, this tragedy vampirism of this other family that is creating a
little haunted thing.
A haunted theme. It's not a theme park. It's not even really a haunted house, though. It's just kind of like,
it's a haunted experience.
We're going to take the crime scene from the first, from the incident itself, and then we're going to turn it into an attraction. Mm-hmm. Not too dissimilar from like people who are pay to go tour John Wayne Gacy's house, right? Which you couldn't pay me all the money in the world to go into places like that.
Right.
I just there's I don't believe in spiritualism, but there's like an aura to being in places where something really bad has happened. But there are people that live for that shit.
See, I would totally go do that.
Maybe it's just because I had a bad experience when I was in high school where in a hazing, I was left in an abandoned mental asylum.
Yeah.
And I could just, there was just this
feeling.
This air of things that were really bad happened in this place.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I wouldn't ever want to go back to that place. Mm-hmm. There's like, one of the things I found in there was like a chalkboard with, it's not my fault, it's not my fault, it's not my fault, written over and over again. And yeah,
off on a tangent.
Off on a tangent, but it's applicable here.
Right.
Because people are paying to go do this. And, but then also people profit off of tragedy.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's an ugly practice, but it happens. And what you have in this one is also a Frendo posse that is very militarized. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not militarized, but they're definitely like kind of like Proud Boy sort of level of militia that basically are trying to find
driving around in trucks together,
heavily armed, trying to find the survivors to basically put them on a quote-unquote trial, which is really just a execution.
Yep, just a public execution.
And there's also this other subplot with a Frendo that is also going around murdering people on his own. Mm-hmm. Which it's no surprise that this is the surviving father of Cole from the first book,
right?
Who's now, this is one of the things that's a little unbelievable. They explain that he was living in the same house as Cole, in like he
was living down in the pool area.
But they also make a big point of how much he smells and how much, and how he's not bathing and how he's not taking care of himself. I know that he lives in a big house, but wouldn't you have noticed that?
No, not necessarily.
Or wouldn't you have gone down in any of those areas and like discovered that?
No, I mean when he's got the guy from the haunt over with him. Yeah. He makes a point of like when they go look at the pool, he's thinking about like, oh, do we even still employ people to take care of this pool? Like the water is so much lower than it usually is and all that. So clearly he's not been down there. Yeah. Clearly he's not been down there.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. And I guess I could buy that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally buy it.
There's just, you know me, there's some things where
I know,
I read into it.
You like to pick things apart.
There's some things where I'm like, I don't know if this holds a scrutiny at all.
Right.
I will say that the strength of both books is ultimately that Cesare really knows how to write characters that, although on the page they seem like, slasher stereotype victims, he does give them a lot of dimension. Yeah. Like, even people that I really was annoyed with, I felt bad if they got picked off later because he uses like the last moments before somebody dies to give them like a short little personal history.
Yeah.
And so then when they do die, I'm like, oh God damn it! Like, I probably would have liked this person then. But like that's the big thing that outside of just the political element of it, is that the characters work really well.
Oh yeah.
Quinn is a badass.
Oh yeah.
Like pretty, not right off the bat, but she gets to that point.
Right. Well, because like between the first and second books, she does all this like training physically and with guns, which she never wanted to touch before, but now she's like, I have to know how to do this for safety, and she just really does all these things to become just a huge badass.
Yeah, and she's also very resourceful.
Oh yeah.
She'll get in situations where you'd think that there's no fucking conceivable way out of, and still figure out a way around it.
Right.
She reminds me quite a little bit of Sidney Prescott from the Scream movies in that regard. Yeah. Where that character just keeps getting cooler and cooler and cooler. That's why it's disappointing that they're making her the main character of Screen 7 again, because in my opinion I feel like that character should have been retired off and given a happy ending. But I digress. Scream 7, what the hell are y'all doing? Any other points that you want to bring up about either of these two books?
One thing that I did notice on my reread that I just finished today, I know you had kind of had some issues with the point of view changing in the second book.
Yeah.
I didn't for the most part, but there's one part towards the end, during the like massacre scene.
The big shootout at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, well, for one thing, I don't have an issue with the point of view changing, but I do sometimes have to kind of like backtrack on my audiobook to make sure I didn't miss something, because when the point of view changes, a lot of times it'll go back in time a little bit, where it'll be like this scene just played out, but then when it switches points of view, it goes back to even before that scene, or partway through or something like that. So, but one of the ones that kind of was noteworthy to me was when it changes from Quinn watching the speech going on before the boys are gonna get shot.
Yeah.
And then she smells something, and then literally, I feel like it's almost mid sentence or mid paragraph or something. It's not even like a different chapter. It just smoothly transitions into, all of a sudden it's Cole's dad's perspective, and it took me by surprise, even though I'd already read this book. It took me by surprise, and I was like, wait, what?
I might have an explanation for that. Adam Cesare, like I say, he's like us. He's also
cinematic.
He's cinematic.
That's
exactly what I felt when I was reading these books. I'm like, these are written
like a movie
to be like movies, and because he's a movie guy like us. He does movie reviews on his YouTube channel all the time.
Nice.
Or even just like short little TikToks of hey, I saw this cool thing, and I'm going to talk about it.
But yeah, that was just like such a cinematic shift.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to find it in the actual physical book so I can see how it plays out with my own eyeballs.
Yeah, there's a kind of a little bit of a hyphen break usually when it switches perspectives without switching chapters. That's usually how you know that the cutoff is there, because I listened to both the audiobook and I read it both physically for my reread. And it's interesting because like it's weird to actually go and physically read a book after you listen to the audiobook, because part of the voice you're hearing in your head is the audiobook reader.
Right.
Whereas one of the reasons that I actually like reading physical copies is because I like to interpret it in my own head what this is. And hear it in the voices that I hear it in.
Right.
It's a little hard to do in an audiobook, but if you get a good enough reader for it, which I can't remember who the reader was. It's the same reader on both books.
Yeah, I can't remember her name.
But she does a really good job.
She does.
All right, well, with that, let's go ahead and go into our final thoughts here.
Okay.
I think that the first book it's a really great gateway horror book in a lot of ways. It's definitely not for younger kids. But this is probably good for people who have elevated past like Goosebumps and then like Scary Stories and then Fear Street and then maybe once they're like early teenager, then this.
Yeah, I was thinking like 14, 15 you could probably handle.
Yeah. I feel like our 60-year-old niece, if she reads a lot, she might like these books.
Yeah, she probably would. She definitely likes movies like this.
Yeah. It's also so much deeper and so much more thoughtful than I had ever expected it to be for a book that I thought was just going to be about a clown, stalking teenagers and killing them.
Right.
But like the tagline of the book is "The kids are not all right," and that should inform you a lot about how this is ultimately a book about generational warfare.
Right.
And it makes its politics pretty clear that it's on the side of the youth.
Right.
That, we're... And I say we, I'm a millennial, I'm 30. I'm still kind of on the younger side, even though I'm older than what we have, like, the kids now.
Yeah. You're a younger millennial, and I'm an elder millennial.
Yeah, but we already have to deal with a lot of fallout from the generation before us, and we have to pick up a lot of their pieces. Right. And this is a book that's really about that. It's about, a generation that is already discarded, and now the generation before them is trying to not just discard them, but exterminate them because they feel like, it's encroaching on their values.
Right.
And that's a very real thing that we have today with the current political climate.
Yeah,
We've had that for quite a while, but it just keeps heating up more and more.
Right.
And I feel like this is a great kind. It's not completely realistic that this could happen, but it definitely gets close to feel like there could be an incident like this, especially with some crazy shit that we've had happen in the country before, whether it's January 6th or, I mean, nobody gives a shit about Donald Trump getting shot now, but but I mean,
that's old news at this point.
But it also made me think about like the second book, especially made me think about what was the town where there was a whole neo-Nazis like marching with tiki torches?
Oh, yeah.
It reminded me quite a bit of that as well. But the first book, I think, is really lean and mean and tight, and like once it hits the ground, it doesn't stop going.
Right.
I think that the second book, it gets there as well, but it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, there's more build-up.
So, Clown and Cornfield 1 is definitely a 5 skull rating for me.
Yeah, 5 skulls for me too.
Book 2, I will go 4.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the polish that the first one has, but it has a lot of thought and care.
It's still very solid. Yeah, I gave that one 4 as well.
And it's very clear that, especially with the trilogy and closed out here soon, that Cesare loves these characters and he loves this world and this mythology that he has built.
Yeah.
And so I'm very interested in how it ends.
Yeah.
It's also worth note there is a film adaptation of the first book in the works. Although
how far in the works?
Well, okay, so here's what's weird is that the last I checked it was supposed to have a release date of August 1st, 2024, but I've heard like nothing about it.
Oh, well, that's past now.
So I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this. Cesare still claims it's happening. But I don't know how much to trust the author on how much knowledge they have. The last I heard that it was Eli Craig directing it, who is the writer and director of one of our favorite movies, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil.
Yes.
So this would be him sort of doing a serious horror movie for once as opposed to his other films. So she also did a movie called Little Devil or Little Evil. Little Evil. Yeah. That's what it is on Netflix. The one that has like the Omen parody with Adam Scott.
Right.
I haven't watched it.
I haven't watched it either.
I heard it's fun. But
probably no Tucker and Dale though.
No, yeah, but that's a high bar.
I know. It is.
Like that movie is so. It's not. There's clearly like some errors in it, but because of the how
that is
funny and how good the comedy is. You don't care that a character is shooting a 6-shooter that has 20 shots in it.
Right.
You don't give a shit. The whole entire thing's a parody.
Got their entire face covered in blood, and then the next scene they're clean.
Nothing happened in the next one.
That's totally fine.
Like
it's worth it.
Like a kid kills himself with the wood chipper by accident, and it's hilarious.
Right. Okay, anyway.
But that's Clown in a Cornfield, and we will have the third book coming out here pretty soon. I think the episode will air before we get a copy of that. But
yeah.
But we should be getting it actually signed and personalized by Adam Cesare. So
very exciting.
I will definitely post about that. And tune in next month for our. I think we got another double book.
We do.
Going here. Do you want to announce the titles here?
Sure. Next episode, we are going to be talking about Final Girls and the Final Girl Support Group. So they're not by the same author, but they came out around the same time, and they've got very similar names.
Yeah.
Not necessarily similar plots, but they're close enough. We're going to talk about them together.
And Alyssa and I have different opinions about both of these books.
We do, so this will be interesting.
There might be a debate on this next episode, but until then, you can find me at mrhyperaware.wordpress.com.
And you can find me on YouTube as the Earbud Bookworm.
And if you have a suggestion for a book for us to read and cover on here, you can either comment down below, or you can email us at pagesfromthedarkside, all one word, at gmail.com. And
absolutely. We'd love to hear from you.
Until then, we will see you in the next chapter of
Pages from the Dark Side. Don't mess up the mic.
The Michael. They call it a Melvin. It's fine. They're Twinkies. They're supposed to be a little bit smooshed.
This will be a special treat just for our YouTube watchers.
Tastes like a fucking cherry Twinkie to me. Well, I hope I didn't fuck up the mic here.
I know. You probably did. I'll go to edit it later and there'll be no sound. Don't mess with it.
Seriously, those look quiet.
I know, the levels are down. Because you knocked into it. Babe, you took it away. Now nobody can hear me.
I'm just trying to make sure that we're equal here.
Okay, but now it's closer to you. And you're already louder.
I'm not that much louder. Mm-hmm. How am I louder and then
it's gonna sound like I'm under a table.
No. Somehow I'm louder and I sound like I'm underwater.
Let me out.
Okay. I hope y'all are enjoying this if you've made it to this part in the video. Alright, and a 1, and a 2, and a...
This has been a production of Pages from the Dark Side. Sound and video production by Alyssa and Dylan Ludwig. Music and artwork by Aaron Shively.